Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever built an n8n workflow that just sings in testing? I mean, perfectly, right? And then it hits production and it's suddenly crickets. Or worse, total chaos. It might sound wild, but there's this estimated statistic out there. Something like 97% of n8n workflows actually fail in production, even if they worked flawlessly during testing. A staggering number, isn't it?
It really is. And what's fascinating here is that it's not some like dark magic or anything. It's truly predictable.
Yeah.
We're going to dive deep into why this happens and, more importantly, share 4 battle-tested strategies to transform those, fragile prototypes into truly bulletproof systems,
Mm-hmm.
the kind clients happily pay a premium for because they just work consistently.
Exactly. And we've all been there, haven't we? That nightmare scenario where you make one small improvement to what was a perfect workflow and then boom, it just breaks. You get those embarrassing middle of the night workflow failures that really erode trust. This deep dive is your shortcut to preventing all of that so you can build with confidence.
Yeah, that 97% problem. It's a painful truth, maybe, but a necessary one for anyone building these automations.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to be your truth.
So if 97% of workflows are failing, what are the biggest culprits? The reasons they just, well, break.
Well, the source happily points to 4 really common reasons. First, you've got third-party API outages. I mean, sometimes Google,
Yeah.
AWS, or even OpenAI just hiccup. It happens.
Right. Even the big ones.
Then there's messy data,
Mm.
unexpected, maybe even malformed data coming in, which
Mhm.
your workflow just isn't prepared for.
Ah, the classic garbage in, garbage out problem.
Exactly. And of course, that small improvement we just mentioned, the one which somehow always manages to break everything, usually because it wasn't tested for all the weird edge cases.
Mm-hmm.
And the absolute worst, I think, silent failures. Your workflow breaks, but you have no idea until, like, a client calls you days later wondering where their stuff is.
Silent failures, oh, those are the worst. You're just totally in the dark. Feels awful.
Right. And what's happening at the core of all this, I think, is the deceptive calm of testing versus the sheer chaos of reality. When you're building a workflow on the n8n canvas, everything feels so perfect and orderly.
Yeah, it's clean, controlled.
You use manual triggers, you test with perfectly formatted sample data, maybe just 1 or 2 items. And you watch your beautiful chain of nodes light up green step by step. It honestly feels unbreakable.
It does. You think, I've nailed this. This is solid.
But a production environment, it's a completely different beast. It's this chaotic, unpredictable ecosystem. Real users, for instance, they send messy, unexpected, sometimes like totally malformed data, things you didn't anticipate.
Like extra spaces or weird characters.
Exactly, or empty fields you thought would always have data. And third-party API services, even the big ones, they can go down for maintenance or have temporary outages or aggressively rate limit your request during peak hour.
Oh, yeah, rate limiting.
Yeah.
That's a killer.
Definitely. You can even have network issues, little DNS hiccups or random latency that just cause API calls to time out for no apparent reason. And webhooks. Often your workflow's front door, they can be targeted by malicious actors or even just flooded with unintentional spam.
Man, it sounds like a minefield out there. What's the most common, unpredictable thing you've seen trip up a seemingly perfect workflow in production?
That's a good question. Thinking about it, I'd probably say messy data is the biggest recurring one. People build for the happy path,
Yeah.
assuming clean inputs, but then a user types in a special character or a field is unexpectedly empty and the whole thing just crumbles.
Right, because you didn't account for that specific variation.
Exactly. That's why the automations that survive and thrive in live production, they're the ones built with what we call a defensive programming mindset. They anticipate these inevitable points of failure. They make the workflows not just functional, but truly production ready, resilient.
Okay, that makes so much sense. Defensive programming. I like that. So let's dive into those 4 essential strategies to build that resilience. What's the first big one we need to tackle?
All right, tip #1. You absolutely have to lock down your workflows with professional-grade security. The single most common and frankly dangerous vulnerability in most n8n workflows stems from how they're exposed to the outside world.
You mean when you set up that webhook trigger node, you copy that URL, paste it into like a form builder or a third-party service, and you think you're done?
Precisely. Turns out that default webhook URL is completely public and unauthenticated. Anyone on the internet can trigger it if they find the URL.
Wow, really? Just open?
Yeah. The risk there is huge. You could rack up massive API costs, say with OpenAI or other expensive services if your workflow uses them, or just flood your databases with junk data. It's a critical security mistake that's often made, but it's super easy to fix.
Okay, so what's the fix? How do you make that webhook private quickly?
The simple, non-negotiable security fix here is header authentication. It's really just a few steps. Takes maybe 2 minutes. You click on your webhook trigger node to open its settings, find the authentication dropdown, and select header auth.
Okay, they're off.
It'll prompt you to create a new credential, and you'll define 2 fields. Header name, a common convention, is XAB key, and then header value. For that value, you need a long, random secret password. Don't make it simple.
Like how long?
A great trick is to ask ChatGPT or a password generator to generate a secure 64-character random string to use as an API key. Copy that strong password, save the credential in n8n, and boom, your webhook is secured.
That's a clever trick for generating the key. So if a request comes in without that header or the wrong key, what actually happens? Does n8n just ignore it?
No, it actually actively rejects it. If a request arrives without that correct XAP key header or with the wrong secret value in it, n8n automatically throws a 401 unauthorized error, and your workflow just won't even start. Protects you completely. It's like a 2-minute setup. But it genuinely fixes, 90% of those security headaches related to webhooks just being open.
Okay, so that's for the entry point, locking the front door. But what about security after the workflow starts? Like when it's making its own API calls out to other services, you need to protect those keys too, right?
Absolutely. Good question. Security doesn't stop at the entry. For outbound API calls, you have 2 main methods. First, and highly recommended, is to always use predefined credentials for any node that has built-in authentication support, like, say, the OpenAI node or the Google Sheets node. Use n8n's credential store.
Because it encrypts them.
Exactly. It encrypts and stores your keys securely. They'll never be visible directly in your workflow's JSON file if you download it, which is crucial.
So definitely don't hard code sensitive keys into the actual workflow nodes.
Got it. Precisely. Never do that. And method 2, if you're calling a custom API that doesn't have a predefined credential type in an AAN, you should still never hard code your API key directly in an HTTP request node's header. That's a big no-no.
Okay, so what do you do then?
Instead, use a set node at the very beginning of your workflow. Store the API key as a variable in that set node. Then, in your HTTP request node's header configuration, just reference this variable using n8n's expression editor. This gives you, a crucial layer of abstraction and keeps your secrets out of sight, even within the workflow structure itself.
Okay, so the key lives in one place, easy to update and not scattered around. That's smart. That's a serious game changer for anyone dealing with client data or high-volume API calls. Okay, so security is covered. What's tip #2?
Tip #2 is all about building bulletproof retry mechanisms and fallback logic. This tackles those external service issues. Even the most reliable services on the planet like Google, AWS, OpenAI, they do have temporary outages, right? Or your internet just, hiccups for a second.
Yeah, that happens all the time. It's infuriating when a little blip kills an entire important process. I remember one Monday morning, our entire sales pipeline stalled because a payment gateway API had like a 30-second hiccup. Total chaos. If we had proper retries then, it probably would have been invisible to the team.
Exactly that scenario. The reality is an estimated 60–70% all API call failures are transient, just temporary glitches. They are temporary issues that will likely succeed if you simply wait a few seconds and try again. Without a proper retry mechanism, a single one of these transient failures will kill your entire workflow execution, often for no good reason.
So it just dies for like a split-second blip. That's so frustrating and unnecessary. How do we prevent that?
So for any node in your workflow that makes an external API call, and this includes AI agent nodes, HTTP request nodes, and most third-party integration nodes, you must configure its retry settings. You click on the node, open its settings panel, find the option Retry on Fail, and enable it.
Okay, turn on retry and fail. What settings usually work best?
Then configure the parameters. 3 to 5 attempts seems like a good range, and a wait time of 5,000 milliseconds, which is 5 seconds, between retries. Why 5 seconds? It's often just enough time for those little network blips to, clear up, or for a service's temporary rate limit to maybe reset.
5 seconds, 3 to 5 tries. Got it. Okay, so retries handle the transient stuff. Makes sense. But what happens if it still fails after all those retries? Because sometimes it's not just a blip, it's a real outage or a persistent issue.
That's where the professional fallback strategy comes in. And it's a real pro tip inspired by enterprise-level systems. You don't just retry and give up. For mission-critical services, you should ideally have a fallback action. If your primary service fails even after all retries, your workflow shouldn't just die, it should do something else useful. It could automatically switch to a backup provider maybe, or at least notify you in a very specific, actionable way.
How does that actually work in n8n? It sounds complicated to, like, build alternative paths branching off.
It's actually not as complex as you might think, thanks to n8n's error handling outputs. On the specific node you want to protect, you go into its settings again and enable the option typically labeled something like continue on fail or output error data. Enabling this will expose a second alternative output connector on that node, often colored red or maybe labeled error output.
Oh, okay. So you get two outputs, success and failure.
Exactly. Think of it as a fork in the road. Your primary path, the green output, goes to the next step it's successful. For example, it's a Gmail node sending a critical email. With its retries configured, the green output goes to the rest of the process. Then, you drag a connection from that red error output to your fallback node, say a Slack message node that sends a notification to an administrator saying, warning, the primary email service failed after retries. Check execution link.
Ah, so it sends the alert. But crucially, the workflow doesn't stop there. It can keep going.
Exactly. And here's the crucial step to make that happen. You use a merge node. You connect both the successful green output of the primary Gmail node and the output of the fallback Slack message node from the red error path into the same merge node.
Oh, okay. So both paths converge back together.
Right. Then all subsequent workflow steps are connected to the single output of that merge node. The result, your workflow always completes, one way or another. It either sends the email successfully and continues, or it fails the email, sends a Slack alert, and still continues down the rest of your process from the merge node onwards. This makes your automation, honestly, incredibly resilient. It's pretty powerful stuff.
That is incredible. I can see how that fundamentally changes how you approach building workflow stability. No more dead ends. So, security, retries, and fallbacks. What's our third pillar of bulletproof automations?
Tip #3. Master centralized error handling and logging. This tackles those silent failures we talked about. As you mentioned earlier, the absolute worst type of workflow failure is a silent failure. This is when your workflow breaks. Your client is expecting a result that never arrives or data doesn't get updated, and you have no idea anything went wrong, let alone what went wrong or where it failed. It's just like a nightmare scenario, right?
Total nightmare. Flying blind.
Yeah. Professional-grade workflows simply require a comprehensive, centralized system for error tracking and logging. You need visibility.
So how do we actually build that in n8n? Where do you even start? It sounds like a big setup.
It's surprisingly straightforward. First, you create a dedicated error workflow, just one new n8 workflow. Give it a clear name like System Centralized Error Handler. You only need one of these per n8n instance usually.
One workflow to rule them all for errors. Okay.
Pretty much. Then the very first node in this new error workflow should be an error trigger node. This special node literally listens for errors that happen in any other workflow that you configure to use it, and it automatically captures key information about the failure, the name of the workflow that failed, the specific node that caused the error, the exact error message, and crucially, a direct URL link to the log of that failed execution.
Okay, that sounds super helpful for debugging. So this one error workflow catches everything you point to it.
It does. Next step. You link your main workflows to this error handler. Go back to each of your critical production workflows, the ones you want to monitor. Find the error workflow dropdown in its main settings panel and select your newly created System Centralized Error Handler workflow. Save those settings. Now, any unhandled failure in that main workflow, any error that isn't caught by a specific fallback path, will automatically trigger your error handler workflow.
That's so smart. Instead of setting up individual notifications for every single flow. Much cleaner.
Right. And for even better debugging, you can add custom error messages within your main workflows. Use stop and error nodes at critical junctures where you anticipate specific problems might occur. So instead of letting a failure propagate with some generic, maybe cryptic system message, you can create a custom human-readable error yourself. For example, after an AI agent node, maybe you check if it extracted a required piece of data. If that data, like invoice number, is missing, you can have an IF node that leads to a stop and error node. And you set the message on that node to something really specific, like critical error. AI agent failed to extract invoice number from the document.
Oh, wow. So the error log will actually show that specific message, not just node failed.
Exactly. That custom message gets passed to your error trigger node in the centralized handler.
Wow. So instead of like hunting for a needle in a haystack trying to figure out why it failed, you get a custom message pinpointing the issue and you just click a link to the exact problem execution. That's amazing.
Exactly. And finally, the last piece. In your centralized error workflow, you log everything. Add a Google Sheets node or an Airtable node or database node, whatever you prefer for logging. Configure to take all the rich data captured by the error trigger node and log it into a new row for every single failure. You log the workflow ID, workflow name, the execution URL, which gives you that clickable link directly to the failed executions log, the custom error message you created, if any, the standard error message, and definitely a timestamp.
That system sounds incredibly powerful. I mean, truly transformative for managing workflows at scale.
It really is.
Yeah.
When something inevitably breaks, because things will break,
Yeah.
sometimes you no longer have to go hunting for the problem. You potentially get an immediate notification. You can add Slack mail alerts in the error workflow too. You know the exact location of the failure. You have a direct link to the specific execution log for rapid debugging. And you build like a historical record of all failures in your spreadsheet or database. This allows you to spot recurring patterns or problematic nodes over time. It transforms debugging from desperately searching through logs to basically clicking a link and seeing exactly what went wrong.
Okay, I love that. Centralized, detailed, actionable. So what's our final battle-tested strategy? Tip number 4.
Tip #4, embrace version control. This sounds maybe techie, but it's actually a simple habit that will save you countless headaches. It's inspired by decades of best practices from professional software development adapted for n8n.
Ah, this is the one about the small improvement breaks everything scenario, right? And you make one tiny change, you think it's tiny, and suddenly the whole thing's like completely broken, and you can't even remember exactly what you did. I've been there, pulling my hair out, trying to undo it. This is why pros use version control.
Precisely. That nightmare scenario is so painfully familiar to anyone who builds things. The solution is a simple workflow version control system. You don't even need to learn complex tools like Git, though you could integrate that too. But let's start simple. First, establish a clear naming convention for your workflows. When you have a workflow that is stable and ready for production, give it a clear name that includes a version number. Something like PRD, Client Invoice Processing v1.0, then v1.1 for minor fix, or v2.0 for a major new feature.
Simple and effective. Makes it easy to see what's what. I like it.
Then, step 2, and this is critical. Before you make any changes to a stable, working production workflow, you must first back it up. Click the download button in the n8n interface. This saves the current workflow's definition as a JSON file to your computer.
Okay, download the JSON.
Store this JSON file in a dedicated, organized place, like a specific Google Drive or Dropbox folder just for workflow backups. And name the file clearly with its workflow name, version number, and the date. Something like invoice workflow v1 0 backup 2025-06 18.json.
So like a manual backup system, essentially, creating a real digital safety net before you touch anything live.
Precisely, a safety net. Step 3, always iterate safely on a copy. Never, ever make changes directly to your live production workflow if you can avoid it. First, create a copy of the workflow within n8n itself. Give the copy a name like DEV or test prefix. Make all your desired changes and test them thoroughly on this copy, using test data, hitting test endpoints as possible.
That makes so much sense. Isolate the changes. Keep the live one untouched and working, always.
Yeah. Protect the production version. And finally, step 4. Deploy carefully and have an easy rollback plan ready. Only when you are 100% confident that your new version, the copy you worked on, is working correctly, should you update the actual production workflow. Usually this means importing the JSON of your tested DEV version over the top of the PR8 version, or carefully rebuilding the changes. And if, after deploying the new version, something unexpected breaks, which can still happen, you have a foolproof rollback plan. Go to your backup folder, find the JSON file for the last known working version, like v1.0, and use the Import from File option in n8n to instantly restore the old working version. Takes seconds. You're back to stable in minutes, not, hours of frantic debugging under pressure.
Oh, wow. That sounds like such a simple discipline, but the impact is huge. Could you quickly paint a picture of a time this rollback saved a major client project?
Sure. I remember a few years ago, we had this really critical client invoicing workflow. Processed thousands daily. Someone on the team made a seemingly minor tweak to a data transformation node. It looked totally unrelated to the core logic, or so they thought. Deployed it. Suddenly, like half the invoices stopped processing correctly. Panic stations.
Oh, no.
But because we had that previous version's JSON backed up, time-stamped, within 5 minutes, maybe less, we just went import from file, selected the old JSON, boom, problem solved, workflow back online. It saved us like what could have easily been a full day of desperate debugging, plus a very unhappy client breathing down our necks. This simple discipline, backup, copy, test, deploy, rollback ready, it's honestly one of the biggest differentiators between, let's say, hobbyists and professionals building critical systems.
It really sounds like it. So if we connect all four of these tips to the bigger picture, it really sounds like you're not just building workflows anymore. You're building trust and predictability for your clients or your own business.
That's exactly it. It's a complete transformation in approach. You go from constantly firefighting random, unexplained failures and feeling anxious about your automations to having predictable, reliable, and resilient workflows that automatically recover from most transient errors. You get immediate, detailed notifications of any critical issues that do need attention. And you can deploy complex, mission-critical automations with genuine confidence.
That's awesome. That's the goal, right? And to help you, the listener, get there, you've even got a concrete, methodical action plan for us, a sprint.
We do. A 4-week sprint to production-ready standards, something anyone can start. Week 1, security audit. Go through all your existing workflows, especially those with webhook triggers. Add header authentication to any public-facing ones. Right now. Audit all your API credentials. Make sure they're stored securely in n8n's credential store, not hard-coded anywhere.
Got it. Week 1, lock it down. Week 2.
Week 2. Retry and fallback implementation. Identify every node in your critical workflows that makes an external API call. Every single one. Methodically go through and add a retry mechanism, remember 3 to 5 retries with a 5-second delay to each one. And for your most mission-critical step, maybe that payment gateway or core API. Build out your first real fallback path using the error output.
Perfect. Week 2, build in resilience. And week 3, that centralized error handling we talked about.
That's right. Week 3, centralized error system setup. Build your dedicated centralized error workflow using the error trigger node. Then go through your existing production workflows and link each one to this new error handler in its settings. Set up the Google Sheets logging or whatever logging you choose to create your error database. Start collecting that data.
Love it. Visibility in week 3, finally week 4.
Week 4, institute version control. Create your workflow backup and storage system, the dedicated Google Drive or Dropbox folder. Go through all your current production workflows. Establish that clear naming convention with version numbers. And download and back up every single one, naming the files clearly. And crucially, train yourself and your team, if you have one, on the new process. Always back up before you edit a production workflow. Make it a non-negotiable habit.
Okay, that 4-week plan makes it feel really achievable. Security, retries, errors, versions. The bottom line here, listening to all this, is that the difference between amateur and professional n8n workflows isn't really about how complex they are, or like how clever the logic is, or how pretty the notes look on the canvas.
Absolutely not. And this raises an important question, I think. Your clients, or your business stakeholders, they don't really care how clever your workflow is internally. They care that it works.
Yeah.
Every single time. Reliably. Predictably. The goal isn't really to build a perfect workflow, which, let's be honest, is kind of impossible given the chaotic nature of real-world data and systems. The goal is to build one that handles imperfection gracefully, that anticipates failure and recovers from it. That's what truly separates the professional, valuable automations from the fragile ones. Resilience over theoretical perfection.
Resilience over perfection. I like that. That's a great takeaway. So as you, our listener, go back to your own n8n projects after hearing this. Consider this. What single point of failure in your current most critical automation could cause you the most headache if it broke silently tonight? And based on what we discussed, what's the very first, maybe small step you'll take this week to build resilience right there, rather than just chasing some unattainable idea of perfection? Think about that first step towards making it bulletproof.